Before we begin, if you enjoy stories of calculated triumph and emotional liberation, please consider hitting that like button, dropping a comment with your thoughts, and subscribing for more content just like this. The air in Havenwood, Oregon, was exactly as I remembered, thick with the scent of damp pine and unspoken resentments. 15 years. That's how long it had been since I'd fled this claustrophobic valley, a 23-year-old girl with a scholarship to Berkeley clutched in one hand and a heart full of fractures in the other. I hadn't left with a bang, but with the quiet, desperate scrabble of a creature escaping a trap. My family had been that trap, a carefully constructed cage of passive aggression, belittling dismissals, and the suffocating expectation that I remain small so they could feel big. Now, at 38, I was Dr. Serena Hale, and I was rolling back into town in a slate-gray Audi that hummed with a power this place had never understood. I wasn't a girl anymore. I was an architect, a property developer, a self-made woman who had built an empire of glass and steel in Portland, a city that rewarded ambition instead of punishing it. I had forged a new identity from blueprints and concrete, a life so far removed from the peeling paint and quiet judgment of my childhood home that it felt like another existence entirely. The only reason for my return sat frail and bird-like in a bed at the Havenwood Care Center, my grandmother, Alina. She was the one exception, the single beacon of unconditional love in a family that traded affection like a commodity. It was Alina who had slipped me $100 bill the night I'd left, her papery hand squeezing mine with a fierce urgency. Go, her eyes had said. Don't you ever look back. But now she was fading, her mind a flickering lantern in the fog of time, and I had to come back. I had to be there for the end, to hold the hand that had once propelled me to freedom. Visiting her was a bittersweet ritual. Visiting my family, however, was an exercise in practiced stoicism. We gathered in the cramped living room of the house I grew up in, a space that seemed to shrink with every passing year, weighed down by the gravity of their collective inertia. My mother, Brenda, offered me that same tight, critical smile I'd known my whole life. "Your hair is shorter," she remarked. "Not 'it's good to see you,' or 'how have you been?' No, the first thing out of her mouth was a judgment, as if my hairstyle was a personal failing she needed to correct. My father, Richard, barely looked up from his newspaper. He grunted a hello, his dismissal as potent as it had been 2 decades ago. To him, my PhD and my multi-million-dollar firm were abstract concepts, less real than the high school football trophy my brother had won that still gleamed on the mantelpiece. That brother, Mark, was lounging on the sofa, radiating an aura of entitled lethargy. At 35, he still carried himself like a high school quarterback waiting for a scout who was never going to show up. He ran a perpetually failing custom motorcycle shop, a venture propped up by a constant stream of parental loans and misplaced faith. "So, the big shot architect is back," he sneered, the words coated in a familiar, lazy venom. "Come to grace us peasants with your presence." And then there was Chloe, my younger sister. 29 and beautiful in a sharp, brittle way, Chloe was the family princess. She owned a small, trendy boutique in town called Chloe's Closet, a business that served as more of a social stage than a viable enterprise. She was engaged to a man with a trust fund and a golf handicap, and her upcoming wedding was the sole topic of conversation. She eyed my tailored blazer with a mixture of envy and disdain. "Is that this year's collection?" she asked, a saccharine sweetness lacing her voice. It must be so hard to keep up. I absorbed their volley of small cuts with the practiced indifference I had cultivated over the years. They saw my success not as something to be proud of, but as an indictment of their own stagnation. I was a mirror they refused to look into. It was during one of these strained visits, while listening to them complain, the roof leaked, the kitchen was too small, the yard was a mess, that the idea began to form. It was a grand, audacious, and perhaps foolish idea, born not of logic but of a deep, persistent ache. It was the ache of the unwanted child, the desperate, lingering hope that I could finally prove my worth, that I could build something for them that they couldn't deny. I would give them a home, not just any home, a Serena Hale home, a masterpiece of design and comfort, a testament to everything I had become. I would pour all my love, all my skill, all my forgiveness into this one grand gesture. It would be a gift so overwhelming, so undeniably generous, that it would have to bridge the chasm between us. I wasn't just giving them a house. I was gifting them a new life, a foundation of security and beauty they had never had. It was, I admitted to a quiet part of myself, an attempt to buy the love I had craved my entire life. I spent the next 6 months in a creative frenzy. While I managed my firm in Portland by day, my nights were dedicated to the Havenwood project. I found a stunning plot of land on the edge of town, a place with old-growth oaks and a view of the Cascade foothills that could make an atheist believe in God. I designed the house myself, every line, every window, every material choice infused with a personal touch, a secret message of love. It was a 4-bedroom modern craftsman, with soaring ceilings and vast panes of glass that blurred the line between inside and out. I designed a chef's kitchen for my mother, with marble countertops and a wolf range she wouldn't have to fight with. A massive 3-car garage for my father, with a built-in workshop for his tinkering. A sleek, wired office for Mark, a space I hoped might inspire some actual ambition in him. For Chloe, I designed a walk-in closet the size of my first apartment, complete with custom lighting and velvet-lined drawers for her precious things. I even designed a ground-floor suite for Alina, should she ever be well enough to leave the care center, with a private garden patio where she could feel the sun on her face. I funded the entire project myself, a cost that ran well into the 7 figures. It was a drop in the ocean of my net worth, but it was an ocean of intention. My construction crews, flown in from Portland, worked with astonishing speed and precision. I knew the town was buzzing with gossip about the magnificent house rising on the hill, but I kept the ownership details shrouded in a faceless LLC. The day of the reveal was a crisp autumn afternoon. I gathered them at the property, their faces a mixture of confusion and suspicion. "What is this, Serena?" Mark grumbled, already bored. "A lecture on property values?" I just smiled and held up a small, elegant box. Inside rested a set of keys. "This," I said, my voice trembling with the weight of the moment, "is for you, all of you, it's a gift." I led them inside. The silence that followed was a living thing. They walked through the echoing rooms, their shoes clicking on the wide plank oak floors. I watched them touch the cool marble, run their hands over the smooth walnut cabinetry, stare out the panoramic windows at the view. I searched their faces, desperate for a flicker of warmth, a tear of gratitude, a single, genuine smile. But I saw something else entirely. I saw my father, his eyes narrowed, calculating the square footage. I saw my mother, her gaze darting around, already mentally replacing my minimalist decor with her chintz and clutter. I saw Chloe spin in the center of the massive closet, a look of avaricious delight on her face that had nothing to do with sisterly love. And I saw Mark, leaning against a doorframe, a smirk playing on his lips. His expression wasn't one of gratitude, it was one of smug victory, as if he had somehow earned this through his mere existence. "Well," my mother finally said, breaking the silence, "it's certainly large." "Thank you, Serena," my father added, the words feeling like a formality, a box being ticked on a checklist. Chloe hugged me, a brief, performative squeeze that felt like being brushed by a snake. "Oh, Seer, you shouldn't have," she chirped, though her eyes screamed it's about time. I drove back to Portland that night with a hollow feeling in my chest. My grand gesture had landed with a quiet, unsatisfying thud. It will take time, I told myself, trying to soothe the raw edges of my disappointment. They just need time to adjust to the sheer scale of it. The love will follow. It has to. The call came 3 months later. It was from a woman named Carol Gable, a notorious town gossip who had always had a soft spot for me, perhaps because she so enjoyed my family's drama. Her voice was syrupy with feigned concern. "Serena, dear, I was just calling to check in," she began. "And I just thought you should know there's a new family moving into that gorgeous house you built, the Winstons. He's a dentist from Eugene, such lovely people." My blood went cold. I gripped my phone, my knuckles turning white against the sleek glass. "What are you talking about, Carol? That's my family's house." There was a pause, one that I knew was pregnant with malicious pity. "Oh, dear, you did know." "Your family sold it. Closed about 2 weeks ago. Got a real pretty penny for it, too, from what I hear." The world tilted on its axis. I mumbled a goodbye and hung up, my heart pounding a frantic, sick rhythm against my ribs. It had to be a mistake, a horrible, vicious rumor. My fingers flew across the keyboard of my laptop, shaking so hard I could barely type. I pulled up the county assessor's website. I typed in the address of the home I had poured my soul into. There it was in stark, black and white digital print. Ownership transferred. Previous owners, Richard and Brenda Hale. Current owners, Thomas and Jennifer Winston. Sale price $2.4 million. The number seared itself into my brain. $2.4 million. Just then my phone buzzed, a text message. It was from a group chat my sister had created, titled Family. I hadn't looked at it in weeks. Now I opened it. The last message, sent just moments ago, was from Chloe. It read, "We didn't ask you to act like a savior. We needed money, not charity." The words were not a knife in my back. They were a bomb detonating in the center of my soul, obliterating every last vestige of hope, every remaining shred of naive love I had harbored for them. I scrolled up, my vision blurring with a sudden, hot rush of tears. There were older messages, ones I had missed in my hopeful ignorance. Photos from Chloe's bachelorette party in Las Vegas. Picture of Mark standing proudly next to a brand new, cherry red Ford F-150 King Ranch Edition, a truck that cost more than my first condo. A link to a wedding registry that included a 5-star honeymoon to Bora Bora. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. The house was never a home to them. It was a lottery ticket, an asset to be liquidated. My grand gesture of love had been nothing more than seed money for my brother's failing business and my sister's fairytale wedding. I sank onto my couch, the sleek leather feeling cold and alien against my skin. The tears came then, hot and racking, a storm of grief for a family I had never truly had. The hurt was a physical thing, a crushing weight on my chest. But as I cried, something else began to happen. The pain was so immense, so absolute, that it burned itself out. The grief cauterized, and what was left behind was not sadness, but a terrifying, crystalline clarity. I thought of the whispers Carol Gable must have heard, the conversations that must have happened at the Daily Grind, the town's main café. I pictured them sitting there, my family, laughing at me, at my generosity. I could almost hear Chloe's tinkling, cruel laugh. She's so desperate to be loved. The thought, once a source of my own private shame, now became a weapon. Desperate, savior, charity. The words echoed in the sudden, vast silence of my apartment. The emotional part of me, the part that had designed a home out of love, curled up and died. In its place, something else awoke. It was the architect, the developer, the strategist, the woman who didn't deal in feelings but in foundations, in leverage, in acquisitions. I stood up and walked to my office. The city of Portland glittered outside my floor-to-ceiling windows, a testament to what I could build. I had built all of this from nothing. My family thought they had taken something from me. They had no idea. They hadn't taken my power. They had just shown me where to point it. I would not scream. I would not cry. I would not send a single angry text. An emotional reaction was what they expected. It was what they wanted. It would feed their narrative of me being unstable, overly dramatic. No, I would give them silence. And then I would give them a masterclass in consequence. I pulled up a satellite map of Havenwood, Oregon, on my largest monitor. I zoomed in on the new house they had undoubtedly purchased. A smaller, more modest home in a new suburban development on the other side of town. It was nice, but it was a cage of a different sort. A cage of their own making, bought with my heartbreak. My eyes scanned the surrounding area, the cold logic of the developer taking over. There was the Daily Grind, the cafe where they held court. There was Havenwood Fitness, the gym where Mark posted selfies of himself lifting weights he could barely manage. There, a few blocks away, was Maple Street Plaza, the tired-looking strip mall that housed Chloe's boutique. And behind their new housing development, a swath of undeveloped parkland, owned by a retiring farmer. A cold, razor-sharp smile touched my lips for the first time in hours. It was not a smile of happiness. It was the smile of an architect seeing a blank canvas. They had rejected the one home I had built for them. Fine. I would just have to buy the rest of their world. My first step was to become a ghost. I contacted my corporate lawyer in Portland, a man known for his discretion and ruthless efficiency. Within 48 hours, a new entity was born, Clarity Development Group, LLC. The name was my own private joke. It had a generic ring and an address that traced back to a registered agent service in Delaware. It was completely and utterly untraceable to me. My first target was the Daily Grind. My research showed it was owned by the Hendersons, an older couple looking to retire. Through my lawyer, Clarity Development Group made an offer that was 25% above the property's market value. All cash, 30-day close, no contingencies. The Hendersons, who had been hoping to sell for years, practically bit my lawyer's hand off. The deal was done before the town even knew the cafe was for sale. My instructions were clear. The current management and staff were to remain in place. Nothing would appear to change, for now. Next was Havenwood Fitness. The gym was a failing enterprise, bleeding money. The owner was desperate. Clarity's offer was low, but it was firm and it was cash. It was a lifeline he couldn't refuse. Within another month, I owned the building, the equipment, and the business itself. Again, the staff remained. Mark would continue to pay his membership dues to a company I controlled, sweating on treadmills I owned. The thought was grimly satisfying. The crown jewel of this initial phase was Maple Street Plaza. The strip mall was old and a little rundown, but it was strategically vital. It housed Chloe's closet. My team discovered the owner was a real estate investment trust based out of state that had long considered the plaza an underperforming asset. Clarity Development Group didn't just offer to buy it. We offered to take the problem off their hands. The negotiations were swift and clinical. The day the deal closed, I sat in my Portland office and reviewed the tenant roster. There it was, Chloe's Closet, LLC, lease expiration in 18 months. I smiled and made a note. I then instructed the new property management firm, also owned by a subsidiary of Clarity, to conduct a full audit of all common area maintenance charges. I knew from experience that these were often informally managed in older properties. I gave the order to ensure all tenants were paying their full, legally obligated share, with no exceptions. Chloe's rent was about to go up, entirely by the book. The final piece of my invisible fortress was the parkland. The 30 acres of woods and meadows behind my family's new neighborhood were owned by a stubborn old farmer named Silas Blackwood. He had rebuffed developers for years. I knew a lawyer wouldn't work. I had to go myself. I drove to his farm, not in my Audi, but in a rented pickup truck. I found him on his porch, a gnarled man with eyes as pale as the winter sky. I didn't talk about zoning or dollars per acre. I talked about his grandfather, who had planted the oak trees. I talked about conservation and land stewardship. I proposed a plan not for development, but for preservation. Clarity Development Group, I explained, was a new firm dedicated to creating privately funded public trusts. We would buy the land at his asking price and legally protect it from ever being developed, turning it into a nature preserve for the community to enjoy, named in his family's honor. Silas, who had feared seeing his family's legacy turn into a sea of beige cul-de-sacs, saw in me a kindred spirit. He agreed. He sold the land to Clarity, believing he was securing its future. He had. He just didn't realize he was also completing the wall around my family. Over the next year, Havenwood changed under my invisible hand. The daily grind got a quiet, upscale renovation, a new La Marzocco espresso machine, better beans, faster Wi-Fi. Havenwood Fitness got new equipment and extended hours. The parking lot at Maple Street Plaza was repaved, and new, brighter lighting was installed. The town was buzzing. This anonymous investor, this Clarity Development Group, was pouring money into Havenwood. The local paper ran a front-page story. A new dawn for Havenwood. I monitored it all from Portland, a silent, omniscient goddess of urban renewal. I joined the Havenwood community Facebook page under a false name, a fly on the digital wall. I saw my mother comment on a post about the café. The new coffee is wonderful. It's about time someone invested in this town. I saw Chloe post a selfie from the repaved parking lot in front of her store. So excited for the glow-up happening at Maple Street Plaza. Big things are coming. They were basking in the warmth of a fire I had lit, utterly oblivious that they were the kindling. The dramatic irony was so thick, so potent, it was almost intoxicating. They felt the effects of my power every single day. They drank my coffee, parked in my lots, and paid rent to me. They lived in a world I was methodically, quietly, and completely acquiring. My grandmother, Alina, passed away peacefully in the spring. At the funeral, I stood apart from my family, a silent observer. They offered me clumsy, awkward condolences before quickly reverting to their usual topics. Chloe complained that the cost of her wedding venue had gone up. Mark grumbled about his motorcycle shop's sluggish sales. Their grief was shallow, performative. Mine was a deep, quiet river. I was mourning not just my grandmother, but the final, severed tie to the people standing before me. After the service, I laid a single white rose on Alina's grave. "I'm okay, Grandma," I whispered to the cool marble. I finally found my own way to be strong. The final phase of my plan was about to begin. The town council had scheduled a community meeting. The main agenda item, a presentation from the mysterious head of Clarity Development Group, who would finally be revealed and would outline their future plans for the town. I made sure the event was heavily publicized. I knew my family, believing themselves to be important local business owners and citizens, would be there, sitting right in the front row. The Havenwood town hall smelled of stale coffee and civic duty. The room was packed, a standing room-only crowd of curious, hopeful townspeople. The air crackled with anticipation. For months, they had lived with the results of an invisible benefactor, and tonight they would finally see the face behind the money. I slipped in through a side door and took a seat in the back, a simple black mask covering the lower half of my face, a silk scarf over my hair. I watched them arrive. My father, Richard, looking puffed up and important. My mother, Brenda, scanning the room for people to impress. My sister, Chloe, dressed in an outfit far too glamorous for a town hall meeting, holding hands with her equally smug fiancé. And Mark, looking bored and resentful, as if his presence alone were a gift to the community. They took their seats in the reserved section in the front row, the picture of local prominence. The mayor, a flustered man named Tom Patterson, stepped up to the podium. He cleared his throat and spoke about the unprecedented investment and revitalization Havenwood had seen. "And it is my great honor," he concluded, his voice booming with forced enthusiasm, "to finally introduce the visionary behind it all, the president and CEO of Clarity Development Group." A hush fell over the room. Every head turned toward the side of the stage, but I stood up from my seat in the back. A low murmur rippled through the crowd as I walked down the central aisle. I moved with a calm, deliberate grace, my heels clicking a steady, rhythmic beat on the linoleum floor. I could feel my family's eyes on me, their expressions a mixture of confusion and annoyance at this unknown woman stealing the spotlight. I reached the stage, shook the mayor's trembling hand, and stepped up to the podium. I looked out at the sea of faces, my gaze sweeping over them before landing and holding on the front row. I saw the dawning confusion in my mother's eyes, the flicker of irritation on Chloe's face. And then slowly I reached up and pulled down my mask. The collective gasp was audible. But I wasn't listening to the room. I was watching. I watched my father's jaw go slack, his look of self-importance evaporating into pure, unadulterated shock. I watched my mother's face drain of all color, her hand flying to her chest as if she might faint. I saw Chloe's perfectly made-up face contort into a mask of horror and disbelief, her eyes wide with a dawning, sickening understanding. And Mark. He just stared, his mouth hanging slightly open, looking like a fish that had just been yanked from the water. I let the silence stretch, letting them suffocate in it. I leaned into the microphone, and when I spoke, my voice was perfectly level, cool, and clear. It carried to every corner of the room, devoid of anger, devoid of pain, filled only with an unnerving, absolute calm. "Good evening," I began. "For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dr. Serena Hale." The whispers started immediately, a wildfire of gossip and realization spreading through the hall. The Hale girl, the one who left, the one who built that spectacular house they'd sold so quickly. I continued, my eyes never leaving my family. They were trapped, pinned by the gazes of the entire town. There was nowhere to run. A little over a year ago, I came back to Havenwood to care for my grandmother. I thought I could build a bridge. I thought I could offer a gift. So I built a home, and I gave it freely with my whole heart. It was a gesture of love. I paused, letting the words hang in the air. The story was common knowledge, but hearing it from my lips in this public forum gave it a new, devastating power. That gift was not accepted in the spirit it was given. It was seen as a resource, an opportunity. I was told quite clearly that my family did not need charity. They needed money. That my gesture was not love, but a desperate attempt to be a savior. The humiliation washing over them was a palpable force. They shrank in their seats, their faces burning with a shame so profound it was almost visible. Chloe looked like she was going to be sick. "So, I decided to take them at their word," I said, my voice dropping slightly, becoming even more precise. "I stepped back from acting out of emotion and decided to act with clarity, as an investor. It turns out, Havenwood has a lot of undervalued assets." I gestured vaguely to the town beyond the walls. "The Daily Grind, where you all get your morning coffee. Havenwood Fitness, where you try to stay healthy. Maple Street Plaza, where some of you," I glanced directly at Chloe, "run your businesses. And the beautiful new Blackwood Preserve that now protects the green space behind the West Hills development. Clarity Development Group was proud to acquire them all." The trap was sprung. I owned the café they gossiped in. I owned the gym they preened in. I was my sister's landlord. and I owned the very land that bordered their new home, controlling their view, their privacy, their world. I leaned in one last time, delivering the final, perfectly crafted lines, my voice a quiet weapon. I gave you one home out of love. Now I own your world out of clarity. I looked directly at them, four shattered people in the front row of their own public execution. Enjoy the shade, I built it. I stepped back from the podium. The silence in the room was absolute. I didn't wait for applause or questions or stunned reactions. I simply turned, walked off the stage, and exited through the same side door I had entered. As I stepped out into the cool night air, I didn't feel the fiery thrill of vengeance. I didn't feel anger or bitterness. I felt quiet, a profound and total peace. The gaping hole in my heart, the one that had ached for their validation for 38 years, was finally, blessedly, gone. I hadn't destroyed them to hurt them. I had dismantled their world to free myself. I got into my Audi and started the engine. As I pulled away from the curb, I didn't look back at the lights of the town hall. I looked forward at the dark, open road ahead, my world entirely my own, built on a foundation of my own making. I was finally, truly free. Thank you for joining me on this journey of cold revenge and ultimate liberation. If you felt that ending as deeply as I did, show your support by liking this story, commenting with who you were rooting for, and subscribing for more narratives that pack a punch.